Of course, the big story of the day, we continue to track developments in KwaZulu-Natal, where families continue to count the lives lost, damage to property following flooding caused by recent heavy rains. At the last count, officials reported at least 20 people had died and dozens of others are said to be missing. And flying over parts of KwaZulu-Natal, south of Durban, currently is my colleague Dasen Thathiah, and just checking out the damage from the skies. Dasen, good afternoon. I hope you can hear me. Tell us, where are you now and what have you seen so far from the skies?
Well, Braden, it's certainly a shocking sight, looking at what kind of damage the Durban floods have caused here in the city. What you're seeing now is the N2. You should also be seeing a significant traffic jam. This is because of the obstruction in the road there. It's quite clear to see the damage that was caused during the course of the night. Parts of the banks on the side have slipped onto the road, causing a severe mudslide here. That's why traffic is moving this slowly. That's why traffic is backed up. This is only one of the areas that has been affected by this. You know that all the major routes, even to the south of Durban, have been affected, particularly near the old airport. That has been the extent of what the heavy rains have caused. Now, last night it was a bit difficult to see because it was in pure darkness that we were operating in, as well as the emergency services personnel. So they were really fighting against the darkness. But it's now during daylight that you can truly see the extent, how high the water is, what kind of damage was caused. We flew over Mdloti a little while ago. Now, you'd remember that yesterday there was quite a few videos that were circulating on social media because of the damage that had been caused in that coastal town there. Many of the apartment blocks, if not all of them, had to be evacuated. We saw today for the first time exactly why that was. There was a major shift in that bank on which most of those apartments are built. That was why the structural integrity of some of those apartments was affected. Even now, looking at this bridge ahead of us, I believe that this is the M4. I stand to be corrected, but the center portion of that bridge, which runs parallel to the N2 on the north side of Durban, is starting to cave in. I hope that you can see that quite clearly. This is the alternative route that people use to get from areas like Mhlanga to Belito to Mhlali and so on. And now, for the first time, we're seeing quite distinctly what's happening right there in the center. That's why vehicles are not traveling over. So what it's really done now is that it's created a very difficult situation for people that need to travel in and out of the city. For now, it's safer that they don't. It's safer that they don't venture onto these roads. And in fact, I'm going to try to take you back to Mdloti just to give you a sense of what happened there. But you'll see now that there's a cordon that's been set up here. But then this is an indication of the damage that's been caused here. You would have heard earlier when the mayor was speaking about the broader effects of the Durban floods. Almost all of the municipal services, the municipal routes, the transport services, almost all of that has been affected. Clinics have been closed, schools have been closed. These roads are inaccessible, many of them. Homes are in some cases completely destroyed. Other families are homeless. The centers that have been put up or have been allocated to these people, in some cases they can't reach them. Earlier today I spoke to our colleague Maseko, and it was quite a tragic story there. There were two bodies that were still under rubble in Verulam. That was because a back room collapsed and two of these workers then couldn't escape. A third man who I spoke to managed to escape, and he says he literally survived by about 3 seconds. That's how long it took after he left before the building came down. But the most tragic part about that is that services and the emergency services in general are so stretched that they have to prioritize who they focus on and what they focus on. And in that particular case, that man claims that he was told that they would only be able to come back and retrieve those bodies if in fact they were able to tell them exactly where they were. So in simple terms, what that meant was that he needed to dig out his colleagues and friends that were under that rubble. So certainly not a fault of any of these people that have been working throughout the night to try to save lives. It's just I think an indication of how broad the problem is and how many areas they need to cover. I mean, where we are now is on the border of eThekwini. That was the Tongaat area that I was showing you. There were pictures that came out yesterday which showed how submerged houses were. They were houses that you could only see the roof of. You'll see the roads that you're seeing now. I mean, you can clearly see that these are impossible for most small cars. The sand has shifted. There's debris lying everywhere. The informal settlements like this one are the worst affected. Many of them have collapsed in other parts of the city as well as here, and ultimately leaving people homeless. The saddest part is that there are so many people that are unaccounted for. We speak to emergency personnel in different areas, rescuers in different areas, and they give us their own numbers. They talk to us in one small stretch of about 20 or 30 kilometers. You've got 10 or 12 people missing, and they are not accounted for. So I think this really now, for the first time, gives us a clear view as we fly over the north side of Durban. Really shows us what those heavy rains did last night, and also what's in store for these teams that are on the ground, the disaster management teams that are on the ground, who have so much work to do and so many people to assist during this time.
Dasen, you were showing us the M4 there with part of a bridge that's beginning to sag a bit. It's a very important highway, as you said, an alternative route between Durban and the northern parts, even going towards Balito and the likes, Umhlanga up north. The main highway, the N2 highway itself, as you go towards King Shaka International Airport, any bridges there that have been affected in any way that you've been able to see from your eye in the sky?
I have. In fact, there were reports of a bridge further up north that was affected, that seemed to be shifting. We received a report from a security team there, IPSS. They said to us that there was the Mhlali, in the Mhlali area, there was a bridge that had shifted. So that makes it unsafe to travel further up the N2 in that direction. On the south, you'll see that even that area is completely submerged in the region of the old airport. But you'll also notice something else that I'm showing you, Braden. That's the prevalence of informal houses like this one in areas like this, in lower lying areas. That is what makes it particularly risky. That's why those are the areas that are worst affected when you have times of flood like this. That's why the warning from the municipality in this case was anyone that is living this close to an area that could potentially flood, those are the people that need to evacuate first. But the reality is that not everyone has that luxury. Not everyone is able to find a place to move to. In Mhloti, for example, where those apartment blocks were evacuated, there were some reports that there were families that were resistant to moving. They were concerned about leaving their belongings behind, about moving out. But eventually it got to a point last night where they had no choice and they had to get out. So we're taking you back down along the coastline now. I did take you earlier along the N2, and I'm trying to show you some of the roadways as well as how high the water is in the river. And as we pass over here now, Braden.
Yeah, exactly. Where are you headed to? Are you going north now? I mean, earlier you showed us Umdloti along the M4 route. Are you going to be looking around the northern parts of Durban?
Yeah, so there are so many parts that are affected. I did want to start with the northern parts first, but I also have an intention of flying over the more central regions. Remember, there are very few areas that were spared. Most areas were affected in some way or form. In fact, if not all of the areas where there have been simple reports. I mean, last night we were out for most of the night. In fact, we got back in the early hours of this morning, and there were sporadic incidents. I think I'm just going to pause that to point something out to you. Take a look at this. This is part of the reason that this area has shifted here. There is a huge crack that has developed on this side. And now also take note of the location and the proximity to the sea. These are some of those apartments that I was telling you about. If you look closely at the bottom floors of these apartments are completely covered. The parking areas are completely covered with sand. There are, along this strip, you have not just residential units, you also have holiday homes, you have a few restaurants along here. I want to point your attention to a home that is literally hanging by a thread. It's a grey home that's on the cusp of this break in the soil here. It's almost certainly going to collapse from what we see here. These are some of the areas that had to be focused on last night, but also some of the areas that were almost inaccessible for rescuers. Remember, they were working in torrential rain, they were working in absolute darkness, and these areas, because of the prevalence of the sand and the moving of the soil here, became very difficult to access. This is absolutely incredible, just what we're looking at now. It's one of two such areas along the Mhloti band that looks like this, that has caused the entire area to shift.
I mean, even the house next door to the one that you're showing us, that you're flying over now, Dasen, is also in danger. And as that gaping hole in the sand looks like you've had kind of a mudslide of sorts that has removed the sand in that area, in that neighborhood.
That's right, and there's the other one that we're passing by now. This is the other problem in this area. You know what's interesting here is when these types of things happen is the amount of time that it takes to secure this area again. And I'm saying this because we saw a similar incident about 3 or 4 years ago on the south near Mhloti, and at that time it looked just like what you're seeing here. That means, for example, that apartment block on the left, none of those units will be able to be used because of the proximity to that. Look at all of the debris that's collected in there. Look at that crevice that's been formed. That's what the problem is here. And at this point, who knows when this land would be able to safely be used again? Because at this point now, anyone that's around this general area is taking a risk.
Now, this area particularly, is it in the northern side of Durban? Are we talking about the Mhlanga Way, the Balito Way, as you are trying to show us some of the risks that are now faced by some of those properties along the coast there, Dasen?
That's right. This is prime property, Praden. So essentially what it is that we are some way, if not probably 10 or 15 minutes away from Mhlanga, which everyone knows very well, which is on the north side. So this is the northern side of Durban that we are seeing. These properties are sought after. These are prime properties that we have here. So that's why when I mentioned to you earlier, this being just one side, we have so many other areas that have been worse affected than this. There are many houses towards the west, which is where we intend to go later, towards the south. That's where you have houses that were completely submerged. But I must also point out that the north, where we are now, is where there were a number of missing people that was reported. There were children among those. I have spoken to rescuers that told me stories of how there were kids that were as young as 2 weeks old, 4.5 months old, 7-year-olds. They had to pull them out of rubble. They had to find them after the cars that they were traveling in had become submerged. The numbers at this point are not anywhere near being an accurate reflection of how serious this problem is and how many families have been torn apart as a result of missing persons or people that died as a result of these structural collapses.
Yeah, Dasen Thathiah, we will come back to you as you are still up above the eye in the sky, currently showing us some of the dangers and the damage, rather, that's been done by the rains in the northern parts of Durban, all the way up to Umdloti there. We'll come back to you, Dasen, but just to focus on another angle of this story. Of course, as you say, the numbers of people affected is going to change as the day proceeds. We'll try and bring you the latest details. We're trying to get hold of authorities as well in KwaZulu-Natal to tell us exactly what is going on, because we understand that scores of people are regarded as missing at this stage and at least 20 officially confirmed death, but those numbers can change at any time.